Stop me if you've heard this one before. You're scrolling through Twitter or Reddit, and you see a post with 50,000 likes. It says something terrifying. BlackRock is buying every single family home in America. They are outbidding you by 20% in cash. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. It's the perfect internet villain story. A faceless, multi-trillion-dollar corporation stealing the American dream from the middle class. But there's a problem. It's not true. BlackRock isn't buying your house. They aren't buying your neighbor's house. In fact, they barely own any houses at all. But don't click away, because the actual truth is significantly worse. There is a coordinated effort to turn America into a permanent nation of renters. There are massive corporations buying up entire zip codes. And there is a secret algorithm, one that is currently being sued by the Department of Justice, that is artificially inflating your rent, whether you live in a corporate-owned home or not. The villain isn't who you think it is. It's much smarter. Why does this matter right now? Because for the first time in history, the average American family cannot afford the average American home. Mortgage rates are high, inventory is low, and rent is eating up 30, 40, sometimes 50% of your paycheck. You feel like the game is rigged. And that feeling? It's not paranoia. It's math. But if we want to fix it, we have to stop blaming the wrong guy. We need to look at the actual machinery that is dismantling homeownership in real time. Part 1. The Case of Mistaken Identity. Let's start by clearing the name of our favorite boogeyman. Why does everyone think BlackRock is buying all the houses? It comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of two very similar sounding names, BlackRock and Blackstone. BlackRock is an asset manager. They manage about $10 trillion in assets, but they are mostly buying stocks and bonds for your 401k. When they invest in real estate, they are usually buying mortgage-backed securities, basically the debt on the house, not the house itself. Blackstone, on the other hand, is a private equity giant, and they are the ones who went on a shopping spree. After the 2008 financial crisis, housing prices collapsed. Foreclosures were everywhere. It was a fire sale. Private equity firms like Blackstone, along with others like Invitation Homes and American Homes for Rent, saw an opportunity. They swept in and bought thousands of distressed homes for pennies on the dollar. They didn't just flip them. They kept them. They turned them into rental machines. Part 2. The Sniper Strategy. Now, here is where the internet math gets lazy. Corporate PR teams love to throw this statistic at you. Institutional investors own less than 5% of single-family rentals in the US. It sounds tiny, right? They use this number to say, look, we're barely a blip on the radar. The real problem is a lack of supply. And technically, they're right. But they're lying with statistics. Because these companies don't buy houses randomly across the country. They don't buy in rural Montana or dying Rust Belt towns. They act like snipers. They target specific high-growth neighborhoods in cities like Atlanta, Phoenix, Charlotte, and Tampa. In these specific markets, they aren't buying 5%. In some zip codes in Atlanta, institutional investors bought over 25% of the homes sold in a single year. Imagine you're a young couple trying to buy your first home in a decent suburb. You aren't competing against the national average. You're competing against a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund that makes cash offers, waives inspections, and closes in 3 days. You cannot win that fight. So, even if they don't own the whole country, they own the margin. They control the price floor in the places people actually want to live. But ownership is just the brute force method. The really scary part is the software. Part 3. The Invisible Handshake. This is where we get into the conspiracy that turned out to be true. For decades, the rental market was competitive. If a landlord wanted to fill an empty unit, they had to lower the price. That's supply and demand 101. But what if landlords stopped competing? What if they all agreed to raise prices at the same time? Well, that's called a cartel, and it's highly illegal. If the CEOs of Marriott and Hilton met in a smoky room and agreed to double room rates, they'd go to prison. But what if they didn't meet in a room? What if they just all used the same software? Enter a company called RealPage and their software, YieldStar. Here is how it works. A landlord feeds their private data into RealPage: lease expiration dates, actual rent paid, vacancy rates. RealPage's algorithm takes this data from thousands of landlords, crunches it, and then tells every landlord exactly what to charge. It's not a suggestion. The software often encourages landlords to adopt the price with a simple Auto Accept button. In August 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice sued RealPage, accusing them of an unlawful scheme to undermine competition. The DOJ alleges that this software creates a feedback loop. The algorithm might tell a landlord, "Hey, don't lower your rent to fill that empty unit. Keep the price high." If everyone keeps the price high, the market rate goes up. They essentially automated collusion. They outsourced the price fixing to an AI so they could claim they never spoke to each other. And the impact is massive. In some metro areas, over 70% of large apartment complexes use this software. That means 70% of the market is essentially setting prices as one giant monopoly. So, BlackRock isn't buying your house. But a software company you've never heard of might be the reason you can't afford rent. Part 4. The Subscription Neighborhood. Now, let's look at the future, because the strategy is changing again. Buying individual houses is messy. You have to fix 50-year-old roofs, deal with strict homeowner associations, and bid against emotional families who actually want to live there. It's inefficient. So, the big players are pivoting. They have stopped trying to buy your house, and instead, they are building their own. This is called build to rent. You might have seen this in your own city. You drive past a new development. It looks like the American dream. Picket fences, 2-car garages, a community pool, maybe a playground. But there is no sales office. There are no for sale signs. You cannot buy these homes. You can only subscribe to them. In 2024, the number of build-to-rent homes constructed hit record highs. We are talking about tens of thousands of new units hitting the market that will never ever be owned by a family. Companies like Invitation Homes and AMH, formerly American Homes for Rent, are betting the farm on this model. They believe that the era of middle-class homeownership is ending. They are betting that you will never be able to save for a down payment, so they will provide you with a premium rental experience instead. They market it as flexibility. They say, millennials and Gen Z don't want to be tied down to a mortgage. But let's be real. Most people don't rent a suburban 3-bedroom house because they crave flexibility. They rent it because they have a family and a dog. And they can't afford a mortgage at 7% interest rates when starter homes cost $400,000. This creates a permanent inventory trap. Every home built specifically for renting is a home that is removed from the purchase market forever. It tightens the supply for buyers, which keeps prices high, which forces more people to rent. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Practical implications. So, what does this actually mean for you and the economy? It means we are witnessing the birth of the Rentership Society. For the last 70 years, the primary way the American middle class built wealth was through home equity. You bought a house, you paid down the mortgage, and 30 years later, you had an asset worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that you could pass down to your kids. That was the engine of social mobility. If that engine breaks, we move toward a feudal system. You have a permanent class of asset owners, the shareholders of these massive AERGITs and private equity firms, and a permanent class of renters who pay off those shareholders' mortgages. The money that used to stay in your community, building equity for your neighbor, funding local renovations, is now extracted and sent to Wall Street. And remember the algorithm we talked about. In a rentership society, you have no opt-out button. If every neighborhood is owned by a corporation using the same pricing software, shopping around becomes an illusion. You pay the market rate, or you move. Conclusion. Here is the bottom line. The BlackRock conspiracy is a distraction. It's a meme that simplifies a complex problem. But the reality is actually more dangerous because it's legal, it's boring, and it's happening via spreadsheet. It's not one company buying everything. It's a system designed to squeeze yield out of a basic human necessity, shelter. Whether it's through build-to-rent neighborhoods that remove inventory from the purchase market, or go algorithms that artificially pump up rents, the result is the same. The wealth transfer from the working class to the asset-holding class is accelerating. If you are waiting for a massive crash to buy a home, understand who you are up against. You aren't just fighting the market. You are fighting a business model that views your home not as a place to live, but as a subscription service. And right now, business is booming. If you want to understand why your money seems to buy less and less of these assets every year, you need to understand the Cantillon effect. It explains the hidden mechanics of money printing that fueled this fire in the first place, and I've broken it down in this video right here. I'll see you there.